at the end of the day, I'm learning that all these emotions that we feel and all these feelings that we're feeling, all these things are all meant to draw us back to God. Why do we get lonely? Loneliness is feeling unwanted, uncared for, left out, unimportant. My loneliness came from, I think, a little bit of disappointment. Sometimes, like, you can really look at your life and you can see that you have a bunch of people around you, and you can see that you have people that care about you, but you know, there's just like that feeling, it's really like a feeling like that, like you feel lonely, like you feel like no one cares, even though there's obviously people in your life who care. And which is another reason why I really wanted to make this video, was just to say that those, like, our feelings aren't facts. I've said that before, but just to say, like, when we are feeling the feelings that we feel, like, what are we supposed to do with them? And we've been talking about emotions, like, I'm reading a book about emotions. We're talking about emotions in young adults now, and now I'm making a video about loneliness and talking about emotions. So, like, I'm really just on an emotion kick and just trying to figure out what we are supposed to do with our emotions. And spoiler alert, all of our emotions are meant to draw us back to God.
Satisfying you while I keep bleeding. I don't know why you act like you innocent. You wanna take a piece of my heart again. I'll get you up, cause I just don't know. Something in your eyes, the way you stare me that I like.
I agree. What do you think about loneliness as a Christian?
That's the easiest way to set yourself up for a quick death, because loneliness is one thing you should not embrace as a Christian. And isolating yourself, it's one thing to be like alone, like if all the people in your life are just not helping you, or filling you spiritually and bringing you closer to God. But if you have people in your life that are trying, or trying to accomplish the same thing you are, or trying to reach out to you, and you're like rejecting them, you shouldn't do that. No matter how complicated things may be, you should always embrace those people that are Christ-centered, Christ-like, and always put yourself around them as much as you can.
But like I was saying earlier, loneliness can come from being insecure, feeling left out, disappointments, fear, isolation, social media. All these things can make us feel like nobody loves us and nobody cares for us. We could be comparing our lives to others. We could be putting people on top of a pedestal. We could, like, even like you could have recently just like moved somewhere and just like literally you just feel lonely. You are not the only person who feels this way. Loneliness it's so funny that we feel lonely, but we all feel lonely. So that just kind of proves the fact that we shouldn't be lonely in the first place, because we all feel the same emotions and we all go through the same things, which proves the fact that we're not alone. And a lot of loneliness just feels from feeling alone. And not only are we not alone because of God, like that's just simple, straight up facts. It's just like God is with you, He is near to you, and He is literally inside of you. And sometimes we have people, like I was saying earlier, just right in front of us, and yet we still feel lonely when we're with them. And that's not necessarily on the people that you're around. Sometimes that's on you, and sometimes that's something you have to look at yourself and look at your insecurities and looking like, what are you expecting from these people in front of you that you're not getting? And as Christians, we should know that the people around us are never going to be perfect, and that we shouldn't put them in that place in the first place, because we know the only person that will truly satisfy every yearn, every craving, every whatever we will ever have is God. God's cure for loneliness is God. Like, God says, like, what are you supposed to do when you feel lonely? You're supposed to go to God. something I really wanted to just talk about, because a lot of loneliness comes from lies in your head, and I really just wanted to come on here and say that we need to fight lies with truth, because a lot of the things that are going on in our head, sometimes we let that stuff, like when you start to feel lonely and you start to feel that feeling and you don't go to God, then that gives space for Satan to plant lies in your head and to plant all kinds of things that are untrue in your head. Or you're never going to get this, and you're never going to be this, no one's ever going to care, blah, blah, blah. Just crazy stuff. And like, if you're not spending time with God and feeding yourself truth, or not even allowing the people around you to feed like truth into you, that's when you start to sulk. Like, loneliness to me, like, I looked at the definition of loneliness and I got a bunch of definitions, but to me, loneliness is just like the ultimate self-pity. It's just like following into the self-pity of all self-pities. And I just feel like it's focusing way too much on yourself and not enough on God and others. And that's where a lot of insecurities come from in the first place. They come from the fact that we're focusing too much on ourselves and how I feel about myself and what people are going to think about me, and what people, me. And it's not thinking about truth. It's not thinking about the facts. It's not thinking about God's word and what he said. It's just thinking about self. And a fact is, you are completely and fully known by God. So if you feel like no one knows you, no one understands you, I'm in this all by myself, the fact of the matter is that God knows you. He knitted you in the womb. He made you, you're fearfully and wonderfully made, all those things. Psalm 139 is a great psalm to go read if you've forgotten the fact that how much God has, how intentional, how he's in the details, how much he cares about you. That's all over the Bible. And the fact that that is a live planet in your head, just like going back to the fact that I said, like, you're giving Satan room to plant those lies in your head because you're not feeding yourself truth. The gospel teaches us that Christ will always be enough. And I'm really like emphasizing on this because, like I'm saying, like, loneliness just is like just feeling unfulfilled and feeling like you're lacking something. Basically, something's lacking. And when we come to Jesus and we have Christ, Christ is enough to fill every single need you ever have. He understands you more than anybody ever will. And Jesus is God. And I just want to talk about how, let's think about the fact that Jesus most likely felt lonely as well. I mean, if we really think about, read the Gospels and look at the situations he was in, like, I know it says that he went to lonely places and he intentionally like was alone at times, which is another key thing. Like, sometimes like it's okay to be alone. There's nothing wrong with being alone. I want to emphasize that as well. But just think about the fact that how he was betrayed and rejected, and how he was just looked down upon, and how like he's literally God walking around. Like, of course Jesus at times probably felt lonely, and we all know Jesus was perfect, so he always went to God with his emotions, and we should learn from that and go to God and go intentionally be alone with God. There's nothing wrong with being alone with God. If anything, God calls us to be alone with him. And I wanted to take a moment and talk about isolation. Isolation is not necessarily being in your house 24/7 like it's 2020 or something, but it could just be a time where maybe you don't have like a big community, maybe you don't have like all these friends, maybe you don't have all these things yet, and that's why God is saying like, hey, I'm all you need. And like I said, seek first the kingdom, seek him first, and he will give you everything that you need. And so like that community and those things will come in time, but first off, it starts with him. There is a difference between being called to like being like God having you in an isolation season and you intentionally isolating yourself from the people of God who care about you and want to feed into you. And there's no absolute way that we should be intentionally just trying to get away from the people of God, especially if they're genuine and intentional about what they're trying to do. They're trying to love you, you know? All this to say is that Jesus understands, because he lived the life that we live and he felt the things that we felt, and he was perfect because he went to God with all the things that he was feeling. So like I was saying about loneliness, it's just like feeling like some sort of lacked and feeling unloved and uncared for and all these things. But we wait on this acceptance from the world when we have the ultimate acceptance from God. God already has said he's cared for you. He's shown that he's cared for you. He's shown that he's he loves you, and he shows that he remembered you and he chose you, and you are so, so loved. And God, he shows those things. He reminds us of those things every single day. It's all in the details of your life. When it says in the Bible that Jesus is our friend, it means that Jesus is our friend. He is the ultimate friend. That is the ultimate gift, is that Jesus is the ultimate gift, just altogether. Savior, friend, God, literally, like, he's just everything. He's the ultimate. We cannot neglect the part that he is our ultimate friend, and he knows and understands us, and he is our gift. It's so that we don't have to feel these things alone. Even the feeling of loneliness, we could go to Jesus and talk about that, because he felt that too. Isn't that like so beautiful that we can go to God and talk about our loneliness because he's felt it too? So do not neglect your relationship with God in your loneliness. That is the first thing you should do, and that is where you should go with your loneliness. And I just want to emphasize, in no way, form, or fashion am I saying you don't need community, you don't need people, you don't need this. I am no way saying that. And I'm actually was going to talk about community next, actually, but I just wanted to emphasize on the fact that before we get the community, we get God. And even when we have the community, we're still supposed to intentionally go and be alone with God. Jesus had 12 disciples with him, and he still went and spent alone time with God. It's just like, sometimes I feel like a myth about loneliness is just like, the cure to your loneliness is people. But no, people were never meant to fill that big gigantic void and that perfect, like, expectation we have of, like, we want people to be perfect. But the truth is, and especially as Christians, we should know this, is that people will never be perfect, and we shouldn't put that expectation on them in the first place. And we should go to our ultimate friend. Go to him, because that is where you get that satisfaction. That is where you get the fulfillment. Someone who will never disappoint you, never, like, always make you feel loved, cared for, all those things, because that is who he is. That's what he's shown us, and that was never meant to be put on us as people, because we're imperfect. What I am just trying to begin with is that it begins with God. All of it begins with God, and that is where we're supposed to go with all these emotions. As wonderful and as beautiful as people are, God, they're not God. We're not God. Speaking of community, I am a huge, huge advocate of community. Like, a lot of people ask me, like, what's been the biggest, what's had the biggest impact on me in my walk with God. And besides, like, the written word of God, a strong number 2 is the community. The people God has put in my life has changed my walk tremendously. Just having people walking on the same path that you're doing and pursuing you, and they're like, they carry your burdens with you and just care for you, and the people you can have fun with and do this with. That is literally the most beautiful thing. And sometimes when I'm looking at my friends, and especially my boyfriend, it's just like, I can literally see the love of God just right in front of my face, and that is the most beautiful gift ever. And that's why it's so important that that's why when you're intentionally isolating yourself from those things, that I will never ever, like, encourage anybody to do that, because that is so life-changing. Like, God has used people, like, he used people to write the Bible. Of course, he's still going to use people in your life to this day to speak into you and to walk with you, and God never wanted us to be alone. And we know, like, from the beginning, like, it was not good when Adam was alone, so he made Eve. So we are meant to have that fellowship with God, but we are also meant to have that fellowship with other people. And if you're feeling lonely in your walk with God, that you don't have those people yet, then that's what God is for. Like we have to build that foundation with God first, saying, like, hey, you are everything to me. You are the only person who will ever live up to every single expectation I ever have. And with that, he gives you people. And just because he showed me grace, I showed them grace. And they showed me grace, and, like, it's just a little circle of grace. What I'm trying to say is, yes, go out and seek that godly community. I highly, highly encourage that. But God should be your ultimate friend. And if you have the good, godly friends that God sent you, they'll point you right back to Jesus. Even if you go to them with your loneliness, they will point and be like, oh, have you been spending time with God? Have you went to God with us? Have you prayed to God with us? And that's what they're for. To push you. Everything, a lot of the things that I'm learning in my walk is just everything is just meant to draw me closer to God and bring me closer to my relationship with God. Even my emotions. Loneliness may be hard, but through loneliness, we are called to befriend God. Lean into your relationship with God. Spend time alone with God. Bring all that hurt, disappointment, and expectations that you had that weren't met, and the absence of things that you thought you have that you don't have. Bring all that to Him, and He will fill you with Him, because He is the only thing that was meant to fill you up in the first place. Those things were never gonna fill you up in the first place. It was always meant to be God. It was always gonna be God. He will not leave you or forsake you. He cares for you and He wants to hear from you. So don't let your loneliness draw you away from God. Let your loneliness draw you to God, because that is what it's meant to do in the first place. Fight those lies that the devil is putting in your head with truth. The truth of the gospel, which is that Christ alone is enough. He will always be enough.